All right, so today we're going to talk about chapter 6.3, fractions and decimals on a number line. So far we've talked about integers that are including positive and negative numbers on a number line. The positive numbers would be to the right, negative numbers would be to the left. So our objective for today, adding on to that knowledge of positive and negative numbers and comparing and ordering them from least to greatest, now we need to start to be able to work with decimals and fractions also on a number line and be able to order them from least to greatest. So, important vocabulary for today. A positive fraction. What is a positive fraction? A positive fraction has a quantity less than 1 but greater than 0 written as a fraction of a whole number. For example, 3/4 would be a positive fraction because it is less than 1, but it is greater than 0. Okay, and it's a positive number, so we are going to be on the right side of the number line, right of 0, in between 0 and 1. Negative fractions. A negative fraction has the quantity less than 0, but greater than 1. Well, some of you are going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, because it's negative, it's going to be less than 0, so left of 0 on the number line, but it's greater than 1, greater than negative 1. So it's somewhere in between 0 and negative 1 on the number line. So written as a fraction, we could have an example of negative 3/4. That would be a negative fraction. Likewise, positive decimals are decimals with a quantity less than 1 but greater than 0. For example, 0.5 would be a positive decimal. So it's so now we're talking about, like I said, positive numbers also including decimals in the number line. A negative decimal would have a quantity that is less than 0 on the number line, but greater than negative 1. For example, negative 0.5 would be a negative decimal that would be in between 0 and negative 1. So let's take a look at some of the procedures for comparing and ordering positive and negative fractions and decimals. First, we need to graph each fraction or decimal on a number line by placing a point or a dot on the number line to represent each given fraction or decimal. So remember, positive fractions and decimals are placed to the right of 0 on a number line, or above it if you're on a vertical number line. Negative fractions and decimals are placed to the left of 0 on a horizontal number line, or below 0 on a vertical number line. When ordering fractions or decimals, least to greatest, write the fractions or decimals as they appear on a number line from left to right, or as they appear from bottom to top on a vertical number line. So we've already talked about that before. Even with decimals or fractions, least to greatest is still going to be starting on the left side, moving to the right side. That's going to be least to greatest. If we were ordering fractions or decimals greatest to least, we would want to write the fractions or decimals as they appear on a number line from the right side moving to the left side. So if we were on a vertical number line, it would be as they appeared from top to bottom. So let's talk about an example. If we were comparing 1/2, negative 3/4, negative 1/2, and 3/4. Remember, first we have to locate 0, 1, and negative 1. So 0 would be in the middle, 1 on this side, and negative 1 on this side. So now we have to figure out for ourselves, where do we place 1/2, negative 3/4, negative 1/2, and 3/4. It's a good idea that if we know that 0 and 1 are here, you might want to split your graph into quarters because we're talking about fourths and halves. So you can split each section into four equal pieces. Well, we know that positive 1/2 is going to be right here in the middle in between 0 and 1. And positive 3/4 is going to be in between 1/2 and 1. Negative 1/2 is going to be on the left side of 0, in between 0 and 1. This would be the negative 1/4 mark. And then our negative 3/4 mark would be in between negative 1/2 and negative 1. Then we need to order the 4 fractions plotted from least to greatest. So remember, if we're ordering from least to greatest, we're going to start on the left side and work our way across. So in order from least to greatest, we have negative 3/4, negative 1/2, 1/2, and then 3/4. The 1 and the negative 1 don't mean anything because they do not have a plotted point on the graph. Let's try another one. So now we're comparing decimals. 0.5, or in other words 5/10, negative 75 hundredths, negative 0.5 or negative 5/10, and negative 0.75 or 0.75 or 75 hundredths. So again, let's talk about what that means on a number line. First, we locate the middle as being 0. The far right in this case is going to be 1, and the far left is negative 1. So if we are working with decimals that are less than 1 but bigger than 0, let's split our sections between 0 and 1 again into fourths. If I had 0.5, that would be the same as 1/2. So 0.5 is going to be in between 0 and 1 on the number line. 0.75 is the same as 3/4, because if you have 3/4, that makes 75 cents out of $1. So 3/4 out of 4. So we're going to be in between 0.5 and 1 right here is 0.75. So I have plotted both of those. Now the negative numbers, I have a negative 0.75. Again, on the negative side, in between negative 0.5 and negative 1, here is negative 0.75 and negative 0.5, which is right in between 0 and negative 1. So if I'm ordering those 4 decimals plotted from least to greatest, I would start from the left and work my way across to the right. Negative 0.75, negative 0.5, 5, and 0.75. Let's try another one. If we were comparing 1.5, negative 1.75, 1.25, negative 1.5, 1.75, and negative 1.25. Remember, now we are also using numbers that are greater than 1, but they are still decimals or fractions, which means that they are going to be in between whole numbers. For example, first we will locate the center as being 0. The first line is positive 1, a whole number, and the second line is positive 2, another whole number. That means that all of my numbers are going to be in between 1 and 2, either on the positive side or the negative side. 1.5 positive is going to be in between 1 and 2 right here. And I plotted a point. 1.25 is going to be in between 1 and 1.5 right here. 1.75 is going to be in between 1.5 and 2, right in the middle, right here. The negative numbers, we have negative 1.75, which is halfway in between negative 1.5 and negative 2. Right here is negative 1.75. Negative 1.5 is halfway in between negative 1 and negative 2. And negative 1.25 is in between negative 1 and negative 1.5. So now if I was going to order these 6 decimals plotted from greatest to least. Greatest to least means I'm going to start from the right side of the number line and work my way to the left. So I have 1.75, then 1.5, then 1.25, then negative 1.5, negative 1.25, then negative 1.5, and last is negative 1.75. So we have to pay attention. Is it asking us greatest to least or least to greatest? Let's do one more together before we let you practice on your own. So now we're working with fractions again. Comparing the fractions, 1 1/2, negative 1 3/4, 1 1/4, negative 1 1/2, 1 3/4, and negative 1 1/4. So first we need to locate 0, which is in the middle, positive 1, positive 2, negative 1, and negative 2. So where is 1 1/2? Well, 1 1/2 is going to be in between 1 and 2, right in the middle. 1 1/2. Where is 1 1/4? Well, 1 1/4 is between 1 and 2, but it's also in between 1 and 1 1/2. Right here is 1 1/4. 1 1/4. So we're going to make sure we plot our points on each of these. Then we have 1 1/3. 1 1/3 is going to be, 1 3/4, is going to be in between 1 1/2 and 2 on this side. So all we've done is we've split this into fourths. So 1 3/4. All right, now make sure we plot our point. Now we need to do the negative side. We have a negative 1 3/4, which is going to be in between negative 1 1/2 and 2, negative 1 3/4. Then we have a negative 1 1/2, which is in between negative 1 and negative 2, negative 1 1/2. And we have negative 1 1/4, in between negative 1 1/2 and negative 1. Negative 1 1/4. Let's plot our points on each of those. And it says that we need to order these 6 fractions from greatest to least. So we're going to start from the right side and work our way across to the left. So the greatest is 1 3/4. Then we have a 1 1/2. Then 1 1/4. Then we have negative 1 1/4, which is still bigger than negative 1 1/2. Notice as we work our way to the left, the numbers are getting smaller because my negative numbers are getting bigger. So now I have, after negative 1 1/2, we finish with negative 1 3/4. I'm not including 2 or negative 2 because they are not plotted on my number line. I want you to give the next couple a try. We have 2 problems here, one with fractions, one with decimals. I want you to plot these points on your number line. Then I also want you to order the fractions first from greatest to least and greatest to least. When you finish those, you will go ahead and come and grab your assignment. I will check your notes, or if you have a sub, then I will check your notes tomorrow. Okay, so if I'm here, I will check your notes and you grab your assignment. If you have a sub, just go ahead and grab your assignment and I will check your notes tomorrow.